Did we build a bridge? Or did we build a permission system and call it sovereignty? Because paying for it isn't controlling it. Owning it isn't governing it. And building it isn't power. And here's the uncomfortable part. Donald Trump has no incentive to open this bridge. If traffic doesn't benefit him, if leverage benefits him more than flow, if delay creates negotiating power, then why rush it? If another country can slow it with paperwork, gate it with approvals, or stall it with process, that's not partnership, that's leverage. We fronted the money, we carried the risk, and we marketed sovereignty. But whomever controls access, timing, and authorization controls the bridge. And sovereignty that depends on someone else's incentive isn't sovereignty, it's permission. To this day, the late, great Gordie Howe is considered one of the greatest players in the history of the NHL and definitely the strongest and toughest players the NHL has ever seen. So it's only appropriate. The engineering marvel, the new bridge that spans Windsor and Detroit, is now named the Gordie Howe Bridge. But there's a lot more to that story. To talk more about it, as always, thrilled to be joined by Paul Micucci. Paul, how are you?
Good, Jim. How you doing?
Good.
Good. Well, you know what? This bridge, so a lot of news lately about the bridge. And
absolutely.
Whether it's going to open or not. But, you know, I pulled some stats. So I was really interested because, you know, I mentioned to you, I spent a lot of time down in Windsor building a huge project years ago. So I was there and lived there and had friends there. And they constantly talked about what a marvel this bridge is, building from each side, from the U.S. side and the Canadian side. Met in the middle. So, and they were all watching and taking pictures as it was going. But, you know, I didn't realize. So smart idea because the Ambassador Bridge is getting older.
It was built in 1929.
Right. So basically, they thought that this would handle roughly 30% of the Canadian-U.S. truck trade, and of course, would prevent single-point failures.
Which is a huge problem in the Ambassador Bridge now.
It is, and it always has been for years as it got older. And I know they've restructured it and they've rebuilt it, but always was. Also provided for expansion in the corridor. So now they're hoping that there'll be more traffic. And it handles, you know, 2.5 million trucks per year and 6,000 daily commuters. Now, the amount of trade that goes over this bridge is $1.5 million per minute.
Per minute?
Which equates to about $780 billion in hard numbers for trade across the corridor.
A year?
A year.
780 billion.
780 billion. It's a lot of money. I didn't realize it was that much.
Wow.
Employment is crazy. So it employs a ton of people, of course, through the construction period. And there's 9 million jobs directly linked to the success of this bridge. So
that's significant.
This corridor.
Yeah.
This corridor. Now, you know, we do know that this is a project that was in the Trudeau-Snyder, Governor Snyder era.
Yeah, that was the governor before Whitmer. Right. So it's 2018 they started construction.
Exactly, and they signed the deal.
Yeah.
So, and they created the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Association, which was, remember, Dwight Duncan.
Yes.
Which is the finance minister of Ontario. So they had lots of problems, right? From day one, there was lawsuits. Matty Maroon and the Ambassador Bridge owner, the billionaire, sued them. And it actually, up to this day, I think they filed another lawsuit in November, which the courts are going to hear, about whether or not he had exclusivity to the tolls on the Canadian side per an old charter that he's referencing.
A lot of people may not realize it watching and listening, but the Ambassador Bridge is owned by a business person. It's a billionaire actually owns the Ambassador Bridge.
Yeah, well, it's a family.
Yeah.
Right? It's the Maroon family, if I'm saying it correctly. And basically, they own it. There's lots of controversy about meetings that happened before Trump kind of weighed in on whether he would allow the bridge to be opened or not.
So the allegation is Howard Lutnick had a meeting with the owners of the bridge, and lo and behold, all of a sudden Trump starts talking about, we're not going to open it, the Gordie Howe Bridge.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, I know, you know, it's interesting how this is all shaking out because there's a lot of financial consequences in Canada, of course. We have some big companies involved in the bridge, Aecon being the biggest one.
Which is a huge company.
Yeah. And then we have some political, which we've talked about on a lot of shows, challenges with Trump now changing his position on wanting trade or as much trade from Canada to the U.S. And so, his flip-flopping of this since, back in when he was first the president of the United States is obvious.
Well, he signed off in 2018. There was no objections.
He did, but now he's sort of recanting it, saying,
Yeah.
I'm not too happy about this. Canada's taken so much. They didn't use enough labor and enough trades on the bridge. We don't participate in this. Now, there's went through and we dug through. It was hard to find. We tried to look, through the financial statements. We had to go back into 2018 and before and dig through a lot of information on the signing of these agreements and everything. What we found was very interesting. So the bridge is projected to take 36 years to cover the $6.4 billion, right? And there's a number of parties. So not all of that is footed by Canada. Some of it is footed by a bridge association.
Correct.
Which is made up of the equity holders, which is Aecon, Dragados, Fluor. So they're the major companies that own 40, and 20% of that BNA. So a lot of that is their equity and also debt.
Yes.
So that they've incurred. So it's quite a bit of money. It's actually, when we looked at BNA's share of the capital financing, they've taken $446 million in senior bonds. They've taken $587 million in short-term senior construction facility and $93 million equity secured by the credit and a letter of intent.
But real quick, we should point out that Governor Whitmer of Michigan and the people of Detroit in that area are all for this bridge. They're totally gung-ho for the bridge. And they know what I think a lot of Canadian politicians and business people know, Paul, that Donald Trump's only going to be around a few more years. And then that bridge, that Gordie Howe Bridge is going to be vital for, as you say, close to $800 billion worth of goods crossing over that border every year.
It is, but and we can't predict the future, but now we were talking about it before. He's sure putting Vance and Rubio out front to try to get profile because of all his challenges behind the scenes right now with Epstein and some other political issues he's got going on. But as that progresses, it sure leaves these companies at risk, and that's where I was going. So we have one Spanish company, one Canadian company, and one U.S. company that are the primarily debt holders on this. Then you have the Canadian people who are really riding this risk out if this thing doesn't open because we fronted the money.
You know what? Mark Carney's approval rating right now is through the roof.
Yes.
People have so much faith in him, his approval rating, the way he's governing. This will be similar to what Stephen Harper did with GM in Oshawa, what Pierre Trudeau did with Crown Corporations back in the day. I can remember Air Canada being propped up and GM and other that. And whether or not the taxpayers will like it, Mark Carney will not allow this to fail.
Well,
so if it means that Canadian taxpayers have to front some money to make sure all the creditors are being paid their full price, I can see the Canadian government doing it.
Yeah, well, the real challenge is if it ever opens. So and a lot of people are saying, oh, he's bluffing and that. But, it's interesting. And what we've learned a little bit about, President Trump and the things, when he says stuff, he does do it. And, it might sound, there's times he backs off a little. There's times he'll make it conditional. But for the most part, he, if he's going in a direction, you kind of know he's going in that direction. And it's very interesting now with him wanting to slow down the exports from Canada to the U.S. With all the things going on from Davos forward, is this really his signaling now that, similar to what he's doing with oil in Venezuela, is he making that move to sort of signal to us that this bridge is never going to open? If this bridge doesn't open, it sits there as kind of a monument to a failed relationship. And then, quite frankly, these companies that, it's interesting when you looked at it, there's a payment in the agreement of $2.3 million that's supposed to go to these companies on a monthly basis over
Correct.
30 years. So that translates roughly to $900 million. So, they took a bunch of construction loans. They, as I just mentioned, they put equity into this deal, but the profitability for them, the return is magnificent. But the risk in this deal, the risk in this deal is something I think we're kind of glazing over. And I think Trump's picked up on that risk, right? We fronted the money. He's really got only one party in this, an engineering company that is really involved in it that probably won't get paid or will lose some money. So is he willing to step in and maybe take care of them and then just not allow it to open? That's really the question of the day.
You used the term risk. The risk right now for Donald Trump, if he pulls something like that, is that whole Rust Belt in the United States that relies on that Gordie Howe Bridge. It's already looking like a bloodbath at the midterms. They're already talking about key sections of Texas, of all places, are going to flip. And if he starts losing areas that he got him elected, like the hardworking people of Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania, because they can't get goods across the border, he has to start thinking about that. Yeah, he's doing it now, but come November, he's going to lose everything.
But they're still going to be able to use the Ambassador Bridge, right?
Sure.
So
but when there's a problem, when there's a fender bender on the Ambassador Bridge and goods and services and traffic's not moving, and you see a brand new state-of-the-art, highly engineered bridge empty, how do you think that's going to play out?
Oh, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot of people. But it's interesting, sort of the predicament we put ourselves in. So now, is this a play for him to come back and say, well, we were going to start to get some money from the bridge after Canada was recouped. So that's how I understand the deal is structured,
okay,
from what I can glean from the agreements. So, and that was like 36 years best case scenario. So now, is he going to come back and say, no, we don't want to do that anymore. We want tolls from day one? Is he going to renegotiate it? So this is an interesting point. We left our flank open a little bit in this negotiation. And we did this, and it's always hard when you reach an agreement because there's goodwill at the beginning. But in politics, as the climate changes, you always have to have a contingency plan. And in this case, are we really left ourselves open for renegotiation of this agreement, and therefore a longer repayment term? Are Canadians looking at a 100-year repayment term for this bridge?
If you're asking me, probably yes. And for a number of reasons, Paul, that's probably the likely scenario.
Hey.
But Trump in some ways needs a victory right now. He's getting hammered on all sides with Epstein.
Oh, yeah.
People now in the United States are crying because their mortgages have doubled in 5 years. People can't afford to feed themselves. There is a huge problem with the economy in America, and he is facing political Armageddon at the midterm. So if that comes, like, let's do a deal. We'll start doing the tolls now. We'll open up the Gordie Howe Bridge. Maybe he can save some face in the Midwest. But right now, he can't afford not to have the bridge open with all the issues he's facing right now. In his delusional mind, he thinks he's winning. But to the average American person struggling to put food on the table, he's not winning.
But is he given himself, has he figured out a leverage point here with which to negotiate? And, I get it. It's politics is fickle. And quite frankly, with him lining up in Iran now. And
he's got a third of his Navy off the coast of her.
Yeah, he's got a third of his Navy. If he goes in and, for all purposes, saves the country. Right. You have hundreds of thousands of people here in Toronto this weekend, asking him to do that in some shape or form. Then does he come out of it a hero? Does he get redeemed from that? And then, quite frankly, stepping in and then bending us and actually taking tolls from day one off of that bridge, he looks like he's a great negotiator. It is a very interesting philosophy. It's a very interesting strategy to come at us at this late date.
With his diminished cognitive abilities, there's no way around it. He's not as sharp as he was 10 years ago. He is not. Can he create a deal like that? Or are you banking on Rubio and Vance to be the brains behind a deal like that? Because you mentioned earlier that they're the ones that are being thrown out there as the face of the administration right now.
But he's got Lutnick and he's got Murin. He's got some really smart people behind him right now.
Lutnick is toxic right now. With everything that's come out in the Epstein files, I would hide him in a cave. The last thing that Trump wants to do is put Lutnick out there because he has a lot to answer for. And that is the problem, that dark cloud hanging over Trump and all his inner circle is their ties to the Epstein files. What did they know? What did they do? Were they compliant? What role did they play in this? In the American people, more and more as this rolls out, Paul, they don't care about, are you going to cut a deal on a bridge? What are you doing in Iran? They want to know what happened to those kids? What happened to those girls?
I'm with you. I just think, my thinking on it as we roll forward, does that get all muted with the events that are going to come? So
that is a possibility.
Or they've diluted so much they've put so much information into the atmosphere around Epstein. If the war breaks out in Iran, if they go in and save the country, does it just set him up? And this bridge is important to us right now.
It's hugely important.
Hugely important to us, but it also won't bode well if we come out of it and we left ourselves open to be renegotiated. And quite frankly, that was, in any deal, whether it's government or business, you have to figure out your risks. And quite frankly, there's a lot of smart people on both sides. In that time, someone should be thinking, what if our relationship? Because at that time, Jim, Trudeau and Trump weren't exactly hitting it off, right?
But no one thought it would get to this point, Paul.
No.
That's the big issue.
I'm with you.
They cut a deal, not thinking it would get to this point.
Right. But, as I'm doing my legals and I have my strategists at the table, there's a bunch of bright people usually around sitting there doing, strategies to figure out how not to make these mistakes. That's a big border crossing. You saw the numbers on it, right?
It's staggering.
It's staggering. And I'm just shocked a little bit that we left our flank open to be at this point, to even have this conversation. Shouldn't there have been a clause in there that if for some reason,
like a poison pill clause,
that they didn't open it, they'd have to pony up half.
And this goes back to I'm not hammering Justin Trudeau. He did some things that were okay. But if you had to negotiate this deal and you had a magic wand, you could have Mark Carney at the negotiating table in his inner circle with all his experience, or Justin Trudeau. Who do you think would have negotiated a better deal that would have had more fail-safes in there like that? And this is the problem now. Carney has got to deal with the aftermath of the deal that Trudeau negotiated.
But I'm with you. And time and time again, and on this show and other shows, we talk about it, Jim, the public accountability. And, I think in my mind, we should have made this agreement and the conditions of this agreement more public. We should have talked about it.
Of course we should have.
Again, we do this as Canadians all the time. We do these soundbite information sessions where we say, they're about to sign. They got two guys sitting at the table, doing this, right? And we don't publish the agreements. No. We don't talk about the agreements. And if we think we're open, these are taxpayer dollars. This is your and my kids' future. Giving this money away. So and
then when things go wrong, they go, "Wait a sec, I didn't know that."
Yeah, he did it, right? And I get it. Like one of these, right? Yeah, and I get it. But we seem to be doing a lot of shows lately where we're going back and saying, "Well, the old administration didn't have this clause."
Yes.
The old we got to stop that, right? Because one of the reasons we're not being so productive, and I just did a show on real estate, and the gentleman on the real estate, he said to me, why is the average income in the United States $65,000 and the average income in Canada is $54,000, whatever it is, right? And I said, productivity levels. That's why it is, quite frankly.
Yep.
I know we need the productivity for this bridge. This bridge is very important to productivity, but we don't want to increase our productivity and then be on the hook for another 36 years of payments to get the money back.
So based on that, Paul, based about the average salary, and that's a telling statement. To me, the Gordie Howe Bridge then is more important for Canada and Mark Carney's government than ever before. So that tells me that they will have to spend the money necessary to keep the bridge open, as distasteful as a lot of Canadians might think, to keep Donald Trump happy.
Yeah, well, and that's I think where he's going. Like I think he's going to renegotiate this deal. He's going to leave Canada holding the bag, double up the repayment term from 36 to 72 years, and basically start taking dollars out from day one. Think about it, Jim. He has said that he doesn't want he doesn't want Canadian goods.
Nope.
So think about what's going over that border. We just talked about the huge numbers: steel, aluminum,
Parts.
soft lumber, auto parts, all the things that he said that he does not want from Canada anymore. So what a way to start this, right? Is to say, I'm not going to open the bridge. Let them come back. Okay, you can open the bridge at the end. I'm going to take toll dollars from day one. So in other words, I'm going to enact I'm going to take my tariff. I'm going to take my tolls. And quite frankly, if you want to ship things to the U.S. still and pay the tariff and pay the tolls, have at it.
Now, if I'm Carney, I will do this. I'll tell you why. Carney's probably thinking, in a few years, there'll be an election. I'm likely going to win a majority. I'll be here after Trump. And when Trump is out of the picture, whomever is president at that time, hey, let's revisit this deal. Because I think he's trying to placate Trump short term for the benefit of Canada, because they need that second bridge.
Oh, yes.
And they need the Gordie Howe Bridge open and commerce going back and forth as soon as possible.
And think about it too. So the Ambassador Bridge is a U.S. company.
Yes.
So not only is he getting income tax from that U.S. company, he doesn't have to sit 36 years to wait to get any money from. So every dollar that goes to the Ambassador Bridge, he makes money from. Every dollar that goes from the Gordie Howe Bridge, he's waiting to get for Canada to recoup and then start to participate in. He has no interest in this deal. And
No.
I don't know who cut it. I don't, whoever sat down in the Trudeau days and cut it, I'm not sure it was making a lot of sense, quite frankly. Obviously, he
was president at the time.
but
Would not he have signed off on it?
it was between Michigan and
In Canada.
Canada. So it was kind of a weird, when you look at the agreement, it is the governor of Michigan and Trudeau. So that's kind of the way it's structured. So it's interesting. And I think this is a really key point, and I mentioned it earlier in the show.
Yeah.
Depending on the way the Supreme Court decision comes down. So if the Supreme Court decision comes down in favor of his tariffs, and the fact that he called the emergencies, act and everything to get the tariffs into place, then quite frankly, he probably uses that for the bridge to get even more leverage. So there's, this is interesting. The next month or few weeks, we don't know when that decision is coming out. They say it's imminent all the time, but they've been saying that for the last 2 weeks.
Now,
right?
we should point out, this comes on the heels that Congress basically shot down the tariffs.
Yeah, well, I don't think. Here's the interesting part where he's struggling with his own Republican group. They can't, in their home ridings, basically go against the constituents.
No.
So he's struggling. He is struggling with trying to get people to get on board, because now they're seeing the impacts, right? They're seeing jobs lost. They're seeing the impacts of the tariffs. Now, they keep telling everyone that GDP is going up, that inflation is going down, affordability is getting better. But the fact is, they are seeing job losses. And in America, because they have a lot of states have an at will, so you can fire at will. Americans hold on to their jobs a lot more dear than Canadians. They don't have severance laws in a lot of states. A lot of states are absent of that. So quite
I didn't
frankly-
realize that.
Oh yeah, in a lot of states, you don't have to pay severance. You can fire someone tomorrow, they're gone. So you work really hard to keep your job, because quite frankly,
You never know if you're going to get another one.
well, and the guy behind you can just take it. So
Yeah.
it's very tough. I've worked in certain states where the people are very controlling of information. They don't share a lot because they're worried about protecting their job security through information. So, they have a lot of issues. So these jobs are moving around. Americans are getting a little more nervous with this. So he's struggling away. So when it goes to the House and they start voting, a lot of people are like, okay, they know that he can veto the bill. So they know that the bill's not going to go anywhere. So they put up four of them walk over and vote on behalf to show their constituents they're trying to work a resolution out. At the end of the day, if it really meant something, would they do it? I don't know if they would. He was pretty nasty. I don't know when they did do it, saying that he would eliminate them. He would go against them and put money behind to knock them out. His own Republican House members.
You know what, Paul? The average American, working class, the price of that pickup truck, I can't afford it now.
Yeah.
My mortgage has gone up. I can barely afford it. When I go to the grocery store, I can barely afford it. They're looking at basic survival. Roof over the head, food on the table, and able to get from point A to point B in some kind of vehicle. So if Trump is doing stuff to hurt them, Republican and Democrat, they're pushing back against that.
Oh yeah, and remember, Michigan is Democrat, right? So the governor, and so they're making a big stink. They're running a bill right now that they think will help and get the bridge open. I don't know if it will, quite frankly, because I think it's going to become a federal issue if he wants to push it forward. But
Governor Whitmer desperately wants it open.
Yeah, and I know it's hard to negotiate with them, and I know we're taking a pretty aggressive tact, because again, to deal with the bully, that's the way we're looking at it. But it is, these are the consequences. Now, would it have happened anyways? I think it would have, quite frankly. I think when this came around and attention was shone on it, which it was by the Ambassador Bridge family that owns it. I think, they looked at it and said, well, this doesn't make sense for us anymore. And let's put this, on hold.
But it reeks to high heaven that the owners of the Ambassador Bridge go to Howard Lutnick of all people. And then the next day Trump comes up with that.
But I know they want an investigation, and the state of Michigan's asked for it, the governor. But here's the thing. He has consistently told us America first. So everything they do now is from the lens of Americans. So if they sit down and do the economic analysis of where revenues are going to come in for the country, they don't look at this bridge positively, right? It's not something that they're looking at saying, I'm going to make a ton of money from this bridge in the short term. He's worried about his lifespan. Listen, a friend of mine, an older gentleman I worked with years ago, he said, I don't even buy green bananas anymore. And, because I might not be around. And Trump's kind of in that situation now, right?
Meanwhile, all the border states are dying.
Yeah.
No cross-border shopping. Vegas is empty. Florida's hurting. American tourism is down to levels they've never seen before. Those governors of those states and those mayors of those border towns are desperate for Canadians to get back to crossing the border.
Right.
They're dying on the vine.
But he's consistently saying, this is that in the previous show I did on real estate, how Americans are resilient and they jump in their U-Hauls and they go take other jobs. He's saying to the American people, these other jobs are coming. You need to jump in your car, move to those states. That's that is traditionally what they do. And quite frankly, that's what he's encouraging to happen. So if you're living in Nevada, he's saying, hey, Nevada might be slower now. A lot of you might need to transition into another trade and that is the resilience of America that I noticed when I lived there. As Canadians, we're not used to that, right? Canadians, quite frankly, we live in a province. We usually stay there our whole lives. Our kids stay there. In America, it's more, transitory.
But those border states, Michigan, New York State, Minnesota, Maine, Washington State, all those border states, eventually, if a lot of people keep moving, as he says, what's happening to their tax base? What happens to their future of the state?
The cities close down. That's the other thing I couldn't, we're not used to that either. It's nothing for a city to close down in America. There's nothing for the main, the steel plant to close, and next thing the city is gone. Yeah. I was also shocked at that. Like you'd be driving along, you'd land in a state and you'd be moving along. You'd say to someone, "What's over there?" "Oh, that used to be the city of blah blah blah." And I'd be like, "Well, where are the people?" "Well, the mill closed down. The city's gone."
And that was it.
And they'd just be the abandoned mill and abandoned buildings and homes all around it.
Because I know West Virginia's got a real problem in a lot of places like that. It's ghost towns, right?
Oh, it is. Even when I was, in the time I was there for years, you'd go into West Virginia. It was scary.
And now it's way worse.
Oh, yeah, it's way worse. But it was scary back then. Like, it was scary how poor and how abandoned the state was. And you look and you go, oh my God.
Okay, so if that's the case, Paul, wouldn't, as a president, you want every bridge and it makes no sense what he's doing, his strategy. He's cutting off his nose to spite his face, and he's saying all these platitudes and all these sound bites, but the average American are taking it on the chin.
They are, but again, he's encouraging them to go where the jobs are. And that's where I think we as Canadians don't understand what they're doing. That's what they're doing. Right? He's saying there are jobs happening here. There's industries happening here. You need to relocate there and you need to start. It seems weird when you say it, but that's culturally how they do it.
You know, in meantime, at the same time all this is happening, Mark Carney announced today that they're going to spend billions building military equipment for the armed forces in the next decade. And 70% of all the procurement money has to be manufactured in Canada.
Oh, and I love it. Now, and this is another show for another day, we need to talk about who's going to do it and how they're going to do it. Because I think that's the missing piece there. Yeah.
But, I mean, for Trump to say that to Americans, they have to have an industry and a factory and manufacturing to go to. Mm-hmm. And so he's saying a lot of these things, and this is where I think he's losing America. He's losing the Republicans. He's losing a lot of the influencers. They're turning on him because they're like, wait a second, my family can't afford basic necessities, and all the stuff's happening with Epstein Island, and all the stuff's happening with the world. And I think a lot of Americans have lost complete faith. Even his MAGA supporters are losing faith in him.
Well, and they are, because think about it. They have to pick up, sell, they have to move, they have to relocate, friends, family.
Right.
But, since World War II, that's kind of been their world. So he's saying that is your world. You're going to be doing this for the country. This is the direction we're going. And that's what whether they like it or not, that's the direction he's taking them. And that was the fault of the whole plan from the very beginning in my mind. When he first rolled out, cutting off other countries and producing at home, was how do you find the people at home? How do you convince them to work again at that level? How do you convince them to go back in the factories? And we're not without the same challenge. And I know recently we're going to hit this on another show, but recently we changed sort of our OSAP loans in Canada.
And grants.
We actually went to actually increasing our tuitions. We did some things for education, which I think are signaling a little bit the same thing here in Canada right now. We want people to seriously look at going into trades and not continuing education, because I think we got into a little bit of a cycle where people kept re-upping to educate rather than going into the work environment.
But back to the bridge, Paul. I mean, if he has to cut some kind of deal with Carney. Carney will do a deal. He's smart enough business person. Short term, maybe it's going to hurt a bit financially, but long term, next 5, 10, 50 years, it benefits Canada. That Gordie Howe Bridge is an engineering marvel, and if we're talking close to $800 billion a year now with the one bridge, how much more could they do with the two bridges?
Well, if he'll let them bring stuff over, and if he does do a deal, that's the two ifs that we've left ourselves open to. And quite frankly, if he does do a deal, you better get ready, because he's going to rub salt in that wound like no tomorrow that we left ourselves open. And that's a shame that we did.
You know what? It may be a shame, but I every week that goes by, I have less and less confidence that Trump's going to make it to the end of his term for a variety of reasons. So I think Carney's like, okay, fine. You want to do that? I'll be here after you. You will be gone, and I'll still be Prime Minister of Canada, and I'll still be building the country.
Oh, I agree. As we talked earlier, I think that's why he's spending more time now pushing forward Rubio and Vance to sort of take the helm. And I think you're going to see more of that going forward.
I know that's why we push Paul Micucci, because he's our guy.